He didn't shout, he didn't threaten, he just turned the key and locked the most powerful man in the world inside the one room no outsider is ever allowed to enter. The Coronation Chamber is sacred, sealed for oaths, not visitors. But when Trump reached toward the scroll every monarch swears upon, the guard didn't hesitate, no warning, no permission, just a single radio transmission. Responsibility is mine. The room stays sealed. What he said next wasn't in the handbook. It wasn't protocol. And when the palace heard it, no one moved, not even the king. Now, before we show you what happened inside that chamber, hit that like button, subscribe with the bell on, and tell us, would you have broken the rules to protect something sacred? Let's get into it. The door made no sound when it shut behind him, not even a click. Just the faint brush of oak against stone as Sergeant Elias Ward stepped into the coronation chamber and paused, letting the stillness settle around him like a coat. It always struck him how different the air felt in here. Cooler, older, as if the room had memory, and that memory was heavy. The chamber wasn't large, not by palace standard, but every inch of it felt sacred. Deep red walls, trimmed in gold leaf. A carved ceiling that had watched over centuries of silence. And at the centre of it all, the velvet reliquary table, untouched except during rehearsals for state events. On it rested the symbolic objects of ceremony, not the actual crown or orb, but ceremonial replicas used for tradition's inner choreography. The state sword, sheathed in blue velvet, the orb of unity, polished to a quiet gleam, and at the far end, enclosed in a thin glass case, the coronation oath scroll, a handwritten replica of the vows taken by monarchs before coronation, scribed in the Queen's own hand decades ago, still inked with the weight of legacy. This room was not open to the public, not even to most palace staff. It was used only for the final walkthroughs, for quiet moments when the heir or monarch needed to breathe before stepping into history. And today it was being guarded, not for ritual, but for inspection. Elias signed the access ledger in silence, date and time neatly recorded. One of only 3 signatures that week. The thick wooden door sealed behind him, its brass latching bar left unengaged. For now. He reached to his side, unhooked the small secure radio from his belt, and turned the volume dial to its lowest setting. Receive only. The rule of custodial silence was clear. Inside the coronation chamber, a guard does not speak unless addressed by a member of the royal household directly authorized by Crown protocol. There were no cameras, no microphones, only memory and presence. Elias had served 3 tours in Helmand. He'd stood ceremonial watch for 4 state funerals and 2 prime minister receptions. But this room, in its hushed sanctity, felt different. He didn't guard it with posture. He guarded it with reverence. His boots were polished but muted, every step planned before taken. He stood still beneath the skylight's cold halo, eyes tracing nothing in particular. The day was expected to be quiet. A delegation later, some vault handovers, a protocol officer's walkthrough, nothing else. And then a crackle. The radio chirped just once and a clipped voice followed. US delegation arriving early. Escort has changed. Stand by. The knock came 5 minutes later, too soon for protocol, too firm for familiarity. Elias didn't move at first. He simply turned his head, eyes settling on the interior latch of the coronation chamber's main door. The knock repeated, followed by the dull mechanical sound of the outer handle being tried from the hallway. Locked, as it should be. Then came voices, muffled. 2 male, 1 deeper, unmistakably American. Elias moved to the door and opened it halfway, body positioned square in the centre. Standing in the corridor were 2 palace security officers, junior tier, and between them, leaning slightly as he adjusted his tie, stood Donald Trump. The former US president looked around the hallway like a man checking into a hotel. "So this is it." "Huh?" he said. "Where the magic happens." Neither officer made eye contact with Elias. One of them stepped forward. "We were told the schedule changed, Sergeant. He's cleared for a brief look." Elias's tone remained calm. "Sir, access to this room requires prior written authorization from the royal household. I have no such clearance listed for this guest." Trump smiled. "Well, someone must have made a call because here I am." Elias didn't respond. The second officer, a younger man with hesitant eyes, added quickly, "We were told by someone from the Lord Chamberlain's office that he had special permission, a private look. 2 minutes." Elias stepped slightly forward, still blocking the threshold. "May I see that order?" Neither man had anything to offer. Trump, undeterred, took one half-step forward. "Relax, soldier. I won't touch anything. I just want to see it." Then he ducked slightly and stepped forward past Elias before the guard could physically intervene without escalating the scene. Elias followed, boots quiet but precise. The two officers looked at each other. One whispered, "We weren't told he wasn't allowed." But Elias had already closed the door behind them, leaving them in the hall. He didn't speak. He didn't scold. He simply turned and assessed the situation with practiced calm. Trump stood in the center of the room now, looking around like a tourist on a private museum tour. "Wow," he muttered, voice echoing faintly off the marble. "You can smell the history in here." Elias said nothing. His hand moved silently to the inside latch and engaged the secondary locking mechanism, a solid brass bolt with no external keyhole. Click, slide, locked. No one heard it but him. It was a quiet move, a silent measure. Standard when an unauthorized person breached a secure ceremonial chamber. The rule: seal, then report. Do not escalate. Do not leave. Elias took 2 slow steps toward the room's center, eyes never leaving the relics. He wasn't watching Trump. He was watching what Trump might do next. Trump's steps were slow and deliberate now, less like a head of state and more like a collector at a private exhibit. His eyes moved across the regalia, the glinting edge of the state sword, the smooth contours of the ceremonial orb, pausing at each as if weighing its worth. He stopped before the replica coronation chair and tilted his head. "So this is where he gets crowned?" he asked. Elias remained silent. Trump turned toward him, waiting. The silence between them stretched until it could be mistaken for disrespect. "I mean, come on," Trump said, gesturing toward the throne. "You guard this all day and you can't even say yes or no." Still nothing. Elias's posture remained unchanged, feet planted, arms behind his back, gaze fixed just above Trump's shoulder. Trump smirked and moved on, walking toward the velvet reliquary table, the centerpiece of the room. He hovered over the sealed case at the far end, squinting through the protective glass at the curled document within. "What's this one?" he asked. "Looks old." Elias spoke at last, but his voice was low and even. "That is the coronation oath scroll, sir." Trump nodded, barely listening. "The thing the king reads, right?" He leaned slightly closer. "Doesn't look like much," he muttered. Then, without warning, he reached out. His fingertips pressed against the glass. It wasn't hard, just a tap, really. A faint smear followed his hand as he traced the edge of the frame, like a child trying to see if something was real. Elias stepped forward, voice sharpened by ceremony. "Sir, please do not touch that." Trump looked up, surprised by the tone. "It's in a case. I didn't damage it." "It is a sacred object," Elias said quietly. "Even the case is not to be handled." Trump raised his hands, defensive. "Relax. I just wanted to see it." But Elias didn't relax. His eyes hadn't left the scroll, nor the faint smudge now visible on the glass. He took one silent step backward, recalibrating distance, then another, toward the chamber door. Behind him, his radio crackled softly. "Legacy unit to coronation post. Status check." Elias hesitated. His hand hovered near the mic, clipped to his collar. His eyes flicked once toward Trump, who was now standing still, watching him. The question from the radio lingered in the air, unanswered. Elias pressed the mic. "Stand by," he said. One word, measured, deliberate. Trump gave a short laugh, more amused than annoyed. "What? You going to lock me in here?" Elias said nothing. He turned toward the ceremonial bar that secured the interior door and reached for it. The brass locking bar slid into place with a sound that didn't belong in the modern age. Clunk. Click. A second latch engaged underneath it, manual, the kind that had no code, no override, no outside access, just a keyhole. And the key, still clipped to Elias Ward's belt. Trump turned around slowly. "Did you just lock the door?" Elias stood fully upright now. "For the protection of the artifacts, and for your safety, sir, until clearance is confirmed, the room must remain secured." Trump blinked. It wasn't the words that got him. It was the tone, the stillness. Like the guard hadn't just sealed a room with a former head of state inside, but was following the same routine as folding a flag or raising a drawbridge. Trump stepped forward, testing the moment. "Okay, come on. It was a light touch. Nothing happened. Let's unlock the door and call it a tour." Elias didn't move. Outside, a knock came at the heavy door, quick, uncertain. Then another. Then came the unmistakable sound of the exterior handle being tried again. Rattle. Pause, rattle. Still locked. Trump turned toward the sound, then back to Elias. "I'm asking you nicely now. Open it." Elias's hand moved to his shoulder mic. He pressed once and spoke clearly. "This is post-Coronation Chamber. Unauthorized contact with Crown property has occurred. Chamber secured. Lockdown protocol enacted. Awaiting further instruction." There was a pause. Nothing from the radio for 3 full seconds. Then a voice. Calm, clipped, controlled. "Confirm. Did you say lockdown with guest inside?" Elias replied without hesitation. "Affirmative." Outside, the muffled noises stopped. Whoever had been outside the chamber was now on their radio too, reporting upward. A ripple was beginning. Trump's voice lowered, serious now. "You're making a big mistake, son." Elias didn't respond. His breathing was even, his boots unmoved. His hands clasped behind his back, textbook ceremonial stance. But his presence now felt like a pressure point pressed against the moment. Trump stepped closer, trying again. "You know who I am. You think locking me in a room is going to go unnoticed?" Elias looked past him, toward the reliquary table. The faint smudge on the glass was still there. He keyed the mic once more. "For record, no damage detected. Contact was superficial. Relic remains sealed. Standing by for legacy review team." The radio didn't answer immediately. Instead, the silence stretched again. 5 seconds, then 10. Trump turned in a slow circle, examining the room like it might open another way. Finally, the voice on the other end came back, quieter this time, measured. "Hold position. Do not open the door for anyone." Trump's face stiffened. Elias didn't flinch. Inside the Coronation Chamber, history had stopped breathing. Trump stepped back, his eyes sweeping the chamber now with something different, less curiosity, more calculation. He approached Elias again, voice sharp but low. "I don't think you understand what you've done." Elias didn't respond. He hadn't moved. His eyes remained forward, posture locked, jaw still. Trump's voice dropped further. "You've just sealed a room with a former president of the United States. If you don't open that door right now, it won't be your badge they take. It'll be your pension, your career, your name off every wall you've ever guarded." Elias took a step back from the regalia table, not toward the door, not toward Trump. He reached again for his mic and keyed in a fresh channel. "Legacy Unit Primary, reserved only for ceremonial breaches." He spoke slowly, calmly. His voice reverberated softly across the chamber's stone and velvet walls. "Legacy Unit. This is Sergeant Elias Ward, Coronation Post. confirming one guest currently sealed inside the chamber following unsanctioned contact with royal ceremonial property. Contact was direct. I have initiated containment protocol. Responsibility is mine alone. A beat. Silence. Then another voice crackled in. A new one. Higher rank. Female, steady. Sergeant Ward, are you fully aware of the identity of the guest? Elias didn't hesitate. Yes, ma'am, fully aware. Former US President Donald John Trump. A longer pause now. Outside the room, the knock was gone. So was the rattling handle. But inside the comms room, half a dozen officials were listening in. Senior staff, oversight officers, maybe even the palace press secretary by now. Elias knew all of this, and none of it changed his stance. He continued, I repeat, ceremonial object was touched without clearance, and glass casing remains intact, but protocol dictates full lockdown following breach. Relic has not been compromised. Chamber is secure. I remain inside. Another voice joined in, quieter, older, possibly the Chamberlain himself. Sergeant, why didn't you de-escalate? Elias's voice didn't rise. If anything, it softened. Because the oath isn't protected by power. It's protected by silence, by rules older than either of us. Across from him, Trump folded his arms. You're risking your job for a piece of glass and a rolled-up script no one even reads anymore. Elias turned his head, just enough to meet his gaze. Not a script, sir. A promise. There was no pride in his voice, no defiance, only the kind of still conviction that filled battlefields long after the guns had fallen silent. Trump looked at him for a long moment, not mocking now, just watching. The radio remained quiet, but in offices across the palace, in the control room, the legacy archive wing, and wherever the sovereign's eyes happened to be, people were listening, wordlessly. Breath caught, and for just a moment, as those 7 words passed through the microphone, not a script, sir, a promise. Everything else stopped. Beyond the thick door of the Coronation Chamber, the corridor had filled. 2 royal security officers stood shoulder to shoulder, earpieces live, eyes flicking between the chamber's silent threshold, and the cluster of senior officials now gathered near the eastern hallway alcove. Among them, unmistakable in his long black coat and crimson-collared sash, stood the Lord Chamberlain. He wasn't shouting. He didn't need to. A quiet command had already been issued through the palace comms loop. Clear the main hall, lock down cameras, no internal chatter beyond Tier 1. The kind of order that happened not during scandal, but when legacy was on the line. Inside the chamber, Elias stood firm. He had shifted his position slightly, now guarding the oath scroll directly, his back toward the reliquary table. Trump remained seated in one of the ceremonial viewing chairs, arms folded, gaze fixed toward the locked door. Then came the voice again, through the channel Elias hadn't keyed. External override. Sergeant Ward, this is Lord Chamberlain Erskine. You are instructed to disengage the locking protocol immediately. Elias didn't reach for the radio right away. He let the words settle, then keyed in with careful clarity. Sir, with due respect, standing protocol under Article 9 of the Royal Ceremonial Preservation Statute states that once a sacred object is touched without clearance, the chamber is to remain sealed until release is granted by either the royal custodian or a sovereign. A pause. Then, we are aware of the statute. Then, I must respectfully decline to open the chamber, sir. Trump glanced sideways at him. There was a flicker of something in his eyes now. Not amusement, not irritation. Something closer to consideration. Outside, Chamberlain Erskine exhaled slowly through his nose. His voice came back less clipped. Sergeant, this is becoming a matter of optics, not just protocol. Elias didn't waver. The optics, sir, were breached the moment the casing was touched. I'm here to preserve the meaning, not the image. Another silence. Then the Lord Chamberlain keyed out without a word. Inside the corridor, aides and officers stepped aside as a black vehicle pulled into the inner courtyard, No fanfare, no briefing. Just the distinct sound of a car door opening and a single pair of polished leather shoes stepping onto wet stone. The man approaching didn't speak. But the moment he appeared, the weight of the hallway changed. Inside the Coronation Chamber, Elias keyed his mic again and said just one thing: "We may have company." The corridor hushed itself before the man even spoke. He didn't arrive with guards or fanfare. No entourage, no announcements, just a dark coat, tailored but damp from rain, and eyes that had seen too many headlines already. Prince William stepped into the corridor without a word. The Lord Chamberlain moved toward him, but was stopped by a single raised hand, not dismissive, not cold, simply unnecessary. William surveyed the sealed door for a moment, his expression unreadable. Then he turned to the nearest aide. "Is the item intact?" The aide nodded. "Confirmed, no damage, minimal contact with the casing. Guard initiated lockdown immediately." William said nothing at first. Then, "And the guest?" A beat. "Inside. Cooperative now, but surprised." William took one step closer to the door. He didn't knock. Instead, he reached for the handheld comm unit offered to him by security. He pressed the transmitter once and spoke, voice clear and precise. "Sergeant Ward, this is Prince William." Inside the chamber, Elias turned, not startled, but aware. He stood taller if such a thing were possible. "Sir," he replied, tone composed, "is the relic safe?" "Affirmative, sir." "Have you maintained silence and procedural conduct?" "Yes, sir. No engagement beyond protocol. Containment only." There was a pause. Then came William's reply. Just a single sentence. "Stand down, protocol. Open the chamber. You've done your duty." Elias exhaled, silent and steady. The kind of breath only a soldier knows, one held in for longer than most would think possible. He crossed the chamber, unbarred the door, and turned the brass key. As the latch disengaged, the heavy oak creaked outward. Trump sat motionless in the chair. He didn't rise immediately. He simply looked at Elias as if still trying to measure something. The guard didn't meet his gaze. He stepped back from the centre and stood at attention, flanking the reliquary once more. Trump rose slowly. He straightened his jacket, gave the chamber one last glance, and walked out without a word. Outside, William didn't look at him. He looked only at Elias and said nothing. No praise, no punishment. Just a moment of silence between two men, one royal, one guard, who understood exactly what had just happened. No ceremony, no cameras, just duty. The procession down the corridor was nearly silent. Trump walked at a measured pace, flanked now by two plainclothes palace officers who hadn't been there earlier. They didn't touch him, didn't guide him. They simply walked, one step behind, a presence more than a statement. No one spoke as he exited through the west gate of the state wing. No headlines would be written. No press conference would be held. And yet, the silence left in his wake would travel farther than any quote ever could. Back inside, the Lord Chamberlain remained still. His hands were clasped loosely behind his back as he turned to Elias, who now stood once more just outside the Coronation Chamber door. "Sergeant Ward," he said, voice cool, "you will be relieved of ceremonial duties effective immediately, pending internal review." Elias nodded once. "Understood, sir." The Chamberlain didn't offer sympathy, nor condemnation. His words were institutional, not personal. He turned and left without further comment. Elias didn't flinch. He had worn that uniform too long to expect applause, too long to ask for understanding. He remained outside the chamber another 12 minutes, until the formal post change arrived. A younger guard, silent and precise, who took his place with a crisp nod. As Elias stepped back into the hallway, the click of his boots echoed faintly against the stone, softer now. He didn't walk like a man demoted. He walked like a man who had finished something. And standing at the end of the corridor, by the marble bust of Queen Elizabeth, stood Prince William. Still no entourage, still no medal glinting under the light, just a folded document in his hand and the same storm-grey coat. He didn't beckon Elias over. Elias walked to him anyway. William handed him the sealed envelope. "You'll receive official notice by morning," he said, tone even. Elias took it without breaking eye contact. William studied him for a moment longer, then, with a quiet finality, spoke one line. "Some people guard walls. You guarded meaning." No handshake. No salute. Just a subtle nod, and the turning of a future king back into the corridor shadows. Elias stood still, the envelope cool in his hand. He didn't open it. He didn't need to. He knew what was inside. Not a commendation, not a warning, just a single line that would never be printed, but would never be forgotten either. The next morning came without headlines. No press leaks, no statements, no questions at the press line outside the palace. Even the usual murmurs in the guard barracks had gone quiet, like someone had turned down the volume on tradition itself. Elias Ward woke at 04:30, same as always, polished his shoes, pressed his cuffs, ate breakfast alone in the corner of the guard mess. By Euro 600, he was seated at a plain desk in the Legacy Documentation Office, a narrow room on the palace's lower floor, lined with decades of incident logs, all written in ink and silence. He completed his report in full, start to finish. No dramatics. No embellishment, just the facts. Time of entry. Identity of guest. Contact with object. Light surface contact. Lockdown procedure enacted by protocol. Resolution. Order to release by sovereign authority. He signed at the bottom. Folded it once. Slid it into the incident file marked Coronation Chamber. Restricted access. No one came to collect it. At 0700, a palace courier arrived at his post without announcement. No insignia, no verbal instruction. Just a single cream-coloured envelope, unsealed but folded cleanly in thirds. The courier left as quickly as he had come. Elias opened the envelope slowly. Inside, on palace stationery, in a hand he had only seen on official briefings and accession orders, were 12 handwritten words. Objects can be replaced, oaths cannot. W. There was no title, no signature, no need. Beneath the note was a second sheet, a formal reassignment. Custodian in residence, Royal Oath Chamber. Effective immediately. Not a promotion, not a demotion. A transfer into a role that didn't carry public rank, but held something far older. Stewardship. Elias folded both papers back into the envelope and slid it into the top drawer of his locker. Beside it sat two other things, a faded photograph of him in uniform at Kandahar Airfield, 2010, and a ribbon-wrapped card from a school group that had once visited the palace, thanking the guard who didn't blink even when it rained. He closed the drawer gently. No one would read the report, not really, but someone had read the meaning. And in the spaces between protocol, punishment, and press briefings, a truth had been quietly written into the foundation of the monarchy itself. That sometimes legacy isn't what's passed down, it's what's stood up for. Would you have done what the guard did, even if it meant risking everything? Should sacred tradition ever bend for power? Or is that where we draw the line? Drop your thoughts in the comments. We read every single one. And if you believe that silence, discipline, and duty still matter in today's world, tap that like button, subscribe, and make sure your bell icon is turned on. Then share this video with someone who still thinks royal guards are just for show. Our next story is already on your screen. Click it now, and we'll see you tomorrow, same time, right here. Because some things aren't inherited, they're protected.